Welcome to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, a podcast that brings personal stories from transplant survivors, their families, friends, and loved ones. This is where you will hear challenges and triumphs of everyone involved in this journey. Our guests will offer wisdom, advice, and inspiration on everything you want to know about transplant. My name is Jenny McFarland. I am a transplant survivor, and this is a podcast I wish I had before and immediately following my transplant. Thank you for listening. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, where you get to tell your side of the story. This is Jenny McFarland, your host, and I have a great episode today with two guests, two sisters, and it's a great topic. I just want to remind you, of course, to leave a rating and review for the podcast. That helps people find the podcast easier. And visit the website at www.pretoposttx.com to leave a suggestion or a comment, or if you want to be on the show. I also want to mention that the Pre to Post Transplant Foundation is hosting its second annual transplant social. So if you're in the Houston area, or if you're planning to be in the Houston area in February, this is going to be a great event for a bunch of transplant recipients and caregivers and living donors and donor family members to come together and connect and learn new things about transplant and participate in some really fun activities. So you can find out more information about it on the website at www.pretopost.org. We're looking for sponsors for the event, and there's advertising opportunities for the event. So you can always visit our social media platforms for more information also. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into this episode with Megan and her sister, Sarah. Megan has a great story. She talks about her liver transplant and what she went through before her transplant. She talks about alcoholism and addiction and all of those challenges that she had prior to having her life-saving transplant. So take a listen. It's a great episode. Share this episode with anybody you know who is a transplant recipient or thinking about transplant, or just share it anyway, because it's a great episode, and it has a lot of information and a lot of inspiring, amazing things. So let's go ahead and jump right in and help me welcome my two guests, Megan and Sarah Lewis. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Megan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi there.
Hi. So, Megan, I want to start with you. I want you to first tell me when you had your transplant, where you had your transplant, and why you needed one.
So I went to Porter Adventist Hospital in Denver, Colorado. The reason why I got the transplant was unknown etiology. They never found out why my liver decided to fail on me. And that was in 2017 on November 29th, which today is my liversary.
Oh, happy transplant liversary.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Okay, so tell me a little bit about like what was going on, like what you experienced before you found out anything was wrong.
So basically, I'm a chef, so I work in kitchens and I work all the time. Before all of this happened, before I went into the hospital, I was feeling really tired, fatigued. I was nauseous. I really wasn't sure what was going on with my body. I was only 27 at the time, so I really just thought of it as like a flu or something minor. And so as time went on, I just got to a point where I knew that I needed to go to the hospital, and I knew that things were not getting better, basically. And so a lot went into that. I did, sorry, I'm a little nervous. I did go to I did spend time in jail in November 1st through the 6th for a DUI that I had back in March of 2017, I believe. And so during that time in jail, I did experience kidney pain, and my urine was dark and it was almost like a brown color in jail. So I was noticing symptoms, weeks before I was actually admitted to the hospital. So I can't really say how long I was, in liver failure, basically. Um, but it had to have been, a couple months, honestly, because I had no idea, what was happening to me. And at that same time, I was still, drinking alcohol as well. So it was kind of normal for me to feel like crap all the time
Yeah.
because of my addiction. And so, yeah, so on the 16th of November is when I was admitted to Porter Adventist Hospital. Um, they started doing the tests. My mom showed up that same day. I didn't think that she would be on that next flight. I didn't realize like the severity of the situation I was in, like death was not on my mind.
Yeah.
And so I just was really confused at the time. And so I kind of wanted to just go over the tests that they took. Um, and just like the enzymes, the liver enzymes were just through the roof. My ALT scores, they were at 19,000, and the standard range is from 12 to 78. My bilirubin was at 20.5, and your normal range is 0.2 to 1.3.
Wow.
My INR levels, they were at 9.4. Standard range is 0.9 to 1.1. And that's the INR is the blood clotting levels. And they took, all the hepatitis is the tests C, A, and B, and nothing was coming back positive. The only thing that really came back positive was the Epstein Barr and the HSV. And they said that would have been really rare for that to cause liver, failure, basically.
Yeah.
So basically, so after all that, I had to get a biopsy done. My INR levels were, too high, so they had to give me plasma to thicken my blood. And so the biopsy had to be through the jugular because they couldn't cut me
Oh,
open.
yeah.
So I actually felt the tube go down my neck and actually felt them take a piece of the liver, which was really weird.
Oh, so you were awake for that.
Yeah, I
Oh my.
was.
That would
Yeah,
that would be kind of weird. Like that would
it
kind of freak
was.
me
It
out a
was
little
really
bit.
weird.
Yeah.
Um, and then let's see. Sarah, do you want to add anything?
Um, well, when all of this started unfolding, it really took us all by surprise. Megan was generally a fairly healthy young woman who, has full-time employment, enjoying her life, living out in the mountains and just, having a good time in Colorado. And, when I didn't even realize that that she was this ill. The week before she was supposed to come out and see me. And she decided not to come because she wasn't feeling well.
Hmm.
And, I get this call. I'm in the middle of the mountains. I also live in Colorado, and we're in the middle of the mountains, and I randomly get a phone call where I never have service. And it's my mom saying that she's, going to the hospital. And I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean the hospital? And, it was very traumatizing for us to, take, Megan, who again was, generally very healthy for her age.
Yeah.
And, suddenly she's put into this hospital and just really, really unwell. It was really took us by storm. We're a very tight knit family. And, you know, how she said my mom was on the first plane out, you know, I was on
Yeah.
down the road as soon as I got the call, you know. I mean, we all came and to show support and just see what was going on. It was honestly pretty scary. I'm sure it is for many people who go through this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I know. And it's great that you guys are all there for her, because when you're on the other end, when you're the recipient, you need a lot of people around. And so that's fantastic that
Mhm.
you guys were able to be with her.
Yeah. Yeah, the support of my family was, huge, and they were all there for me. And again, mentally I was declining. So I think that I gained about 40 to 50 pounds of water weight while I was in the hospital. And it, I just remember bits and pieces of that first part. I don't remember them saying that they found the liver for me. They talked to me about everything, but nothing got ingested through my brain.
Yeah.
So I didn't really fully know what was going on. So my
And let me,
mom, yeah,
go
my
ahead.
mom took she actually signed all the paperwork for the transplant and everything, since my mind was no longer able to function properly.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned that you were still drinking alcohol at the time.
Mhm.
And so my question is, did you have a problem with alcohol, or were
Yeah,
you just drinking alcohol?
no, definitely. I had a problem with alcohol
Okay.
for years. So it wasn't a new thing for me to, have an alcohol problem. I was full aware of my addiction at the time, and I wasn't quite sure how to ask for help.
Yeah.
So um, it really just came down to the fact that I loved being numb all the time because I didn't want to face whatever I was facing.
Yeah.
Because, when you start going down that negative path, it just seems like, one thing after the other. If we focus on the negative, we're going to bring more negative. So it's,
Right.
of course, my life wasn't perfect, obviously, but I had to deal with my consequences. And wherever I got the virus from, it changed me for the better. Because I do want to add that before any of this happened, I was begging for my life. Like, I begged for my addiction to stop. I remember, like, one morning before work, I got on my knees and I started begging. I begged for my addiction to just stop, because it was that bad. And of course, when you're an addict, you don't want people to see you, you know,
Yeah.
at your worst. So I begged God for my life. And, a few weeks later, I go through all this.
Yeah.
So it's, it was really hard on me. Like, I grew up Catholic, and I grew up, believing in God. And I had a period of time where, I wasn't so sure about it. But there is, I mean, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, but yeah, I don't want to get too involved with that. But it's just, I want people to know that, like, when you're at your lowest, it is good to call on him, because you can't do this yourself.
Yeah.
You can't.
And Sarah, did you know about her addiction, and how did you and your family deal with that and feel about that?
So at the time, I feel like Megan was very good at hiding how bad things really were.
Yeah.
Um, as most people who have those sorts of issues are able to. Her work schedule, it was hard to really get a real insider look into what her life looked like. For us, you know, she worked a lot. She worked in a kitchen, knowing that, you know, that is a culture that is a lot of pressure, and it comes with that lifestyle of using. And you know, I think none of us were really aware of those kinds of issues to the extent that they were.
Yeah.
And, you know, for us, I think we started to get a glimpse of that when we started investigating sort of things that maybe could have led to this virus or whatever it was. You know, we went to her apartment to gather some of her things, and, you know, in her truck and things like that, there was evidence of, you know, drinking, you know, bottles and things like that. And, you know, I think maybe the pieces maybe came together a little bit there. You know, for us, we were more looking for things like, you know, supplements, you know, those sorts of things that she might have been taking that could have caused this sort of liver failure. We
Yeah.
weren't really expecting to find other things like the drinking. But I do think that it did come to light a little bit once we were doing some of that investigation. So,
Yeah.
and you know, it is a problem that runs in our family. And you know, the pressure of being in the career that she's chosen, you know, it does make sense looking back on it now.
Yeah. And so
Mhm.
I have another question. Learning that you needed a transplant while going through this, I was just curious how the medical team handled that, because usually if there's anything wrong, they don't let you get a transplant right away. Like if you're overweight or if you're smoking or if you're, you know, drinking or doing drugs or whatever. Um, it seemed to me, and this is just through my experience, that they put that on hold until they can see that you're completely over that. How come
And
that didn't happen with you?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
Um, honestly, I've heard so many stories of addicts having to wait a year to
Yeah.
prove that they will no longer use. I did not have time on my side. My MELD score was over 40 when I was
Yeah.
admitted.
Yeah.
So I had basically 2 weeks to live.
I
Uh,
guess whenever you say it like that, that could be potentially why, because you didn't have enough time.
yeah.
Whereas the stories I've heard, people, you know, they're not at that spot yet. They're just ready to start the transplant process. So maybe that's why. Yeah.
And I basically, you know, I made an oath to the transplant team. And I do remember, you know, this part. And I told them I would never drink or do drugs ever again. And I kept that because I mean, it's such a gift, you know,
Yeah.
and for someone to turn around and to basically abuse that gift, I could never do that. Like I have changed as a person, you know, 100% from where I used to be, like mindset and everything, you know.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it now, it's like I'm not scared to go back to where I was because I know I won't.
Yeah.
I'm way stronger than that, and like and I keep going back to my donor and who he was and where he came from. You know, I always wonder, you know, all of that still, and I thank him every day that I wake up because without him, you know, I would not be here.
Yeah.
And
For
so
sure.
yeah, I keep that oath with me every day.
Yeah.
I'm not scared to, you know, I was scared to go back to my career because of, you know, the addiction I had, but it's again just a total 360. Like I have so much more energy, you know, I'm like more excited about life.
Yeah.
I'm not negative. You know, it's beautiful. It's I mean I can't express the gratitude I have today
That's
and for what I
fantastic.
went through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Did you have a hard time after you received your transplant dealing with that since you were addicted to alcohol?
Um it wasn't so much like craving. I didn't have cravings. It was more of people around me that were
Oh,
drinking.
yeah.
It was affecting me probably the first 2 years after my transplant because it did hurt to see my family still drink after what I went through.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that I can't change anyone, you know, they have to change themselves. But
Yeah.
I went through a point where, you know, I was expressing myself towards a few of my family members about how I felt. And I just realized that it's not on me for them to change. It's, it's on them, and I just have to let it go.
Yeah.
So it did hurt, to see that, but it gets easier. And like today I don't crave alcohol at all, and I'm so blessed that that bondage is gone. Like
Yeah.
God has seriously taken that away from me, and it was the one thing in my life that kept bringing problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
Well,
was.
that's great. I'm glad that you've been able to let that go. Sounds like God answered your prayers that day. Through
I
it was
I
through
was so
transplant,
tired.
but you did it
There was
anyway.
a reason.
Yeah.
And funny how it comes up like that, it's you might think you're at your bottom and then you just go a little more, but look where it brought you.
Yeah.
Um and I would like to just add, like, as far as the transplant team considering her for a transplant right away, I don't think they could directly attribute her liver failure to her drinking. Not to say that maybe it didn't have an influence, but you know, that team at Porter is absolutely amazing. They knew exactly how hard to push. And, when it was time to decide whether she was going to get that transplant or not, they made it known and they made it happen. I mean, within days, she got pushed up the list, and, I, I can't imagine not having her here today, and it's because of those people that she is here. Prayers were answered for sure, but that team was just so amazing. They deal with hundreds of patients every year, and us going in without her having any kind of previous illness and just having this drop upon her, I mean, they knew exactly how to handle it.
Yeah.
At the time, we were so panicked, like, oh, is this the right decision? Is this what we need to do? And what was the main doctor's name? Dr. Cronin, Megan, is that who it was?
Yeah, David Cronin. Yeah.
Yeah. So he just knew exactly what to say and how to, just get us in that mindset that this is what needs to happen. And, um, like Megan's saying, like, she's just a completely new person, like so full of life. And, in a way, it really was a blessing. I'm sorry you had to go through it, Megan.
Yeah.
We all were there for you, but man, everything does really happen for a reason.
For
I
sure.
believe so.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about your transplant surgery.
Okay.
How did that go? How did tell me about when you found out you were going and how the surgery went, what you felt when you woke up.
Yeah. Well, basically, I don't remember anything going in, so I don't remember
Oh, yeah.
any of that. But Sarah was there for the night before I went into surgery, so she dealt with me that entire night. Actually, she didn't sleep at all, and she just she was my number one supporter.
I could probably elaborate a little bit if you want,
Yeah,
Megan.
Yeah.
that'd be nice.
So, she had been in the hospital for like several weeks at this point. We had decided to get her on the transplant list with the doctors. They pushed her up to number one. I think it was probably, several days after getting on the list. They came in probably about 10 o'clock at night and informed me that they had found a liver. At this point, I'm panicking a little bit because it's still a terrifying concept. But Megan, she's trying to get comfortable. She's in her bed. She's got a million tubes on her, just plasma, all kinds of stuff going into her body, just trying to keep her going. And at this point, her encephalitis, her brain swelling is just so intense. I don't think she could comprehend anything from like the previous couple of like days at least.
Yeah.
And I think if they hadn't have come in that night, she probably wouldn't have made it, at least in the next 24 hours. So she was right on the brink. And so I think it came after they harvested the liver, they came in maybe about 6 in the morning, took her into surgery. And it actually turned out that the liver was a little bit larger than they expected. It was very hard for them to get the liver into her abdominal cavity. They had to use a hernia mesh to close her up. They weren't able to pull her abdominal muscles together. So the mesh was kind of what was holding everything together.
Oh,
And the surgery was actually pretty complicated. I believe she aspirated several times, which prolonged the surgery. It was very difficult.
yeah.
After it was, I can't remember how many hours it was, but, later in the day, they brought her out. We were all waiting to see her. And I mean, it was traumatizing to see her in that state. I mean, there was iodine everywhere. You could tell that they had a very difficult surgery.
Yeah.
Um, at that point, she's on a ventilator, she's sedated. And I think it's another week or two before she comes off of the sedation. And they actually, I think it was after the first day or two, they had to take her back into surgery. The liver levels, for whatever reason, were dropping. And they wanted to get back in there and make sure that all of the ducts and everything had been sewn in correctly, that nothing was done wrong. And so what had happened was a portion of the liver, when they took her back in, was pressing up against her abdominal cavity and had started to die off. So a portion of her new liver was now starting to die, which was also terrifying. And so, they said there was nothing much to do. They closed her back up. And then they wanted to take her back in a separate time. So this was 3 times of her going into surgery. After they closed her up that second time, there was another issue. I think it was with the mesh, it tore. And they went to go and do this third surgery, and she aspirated again, and it was an unsuccessful um, portion of it. So, I mean, she went through literal hell. I mean, I can only imagine the toll that your body took, Megan. I mean, we can see your scars now, but your poor little body just went through it. And so, those, and then, after that third time of going in, there was no more surgery after that. It was just recovery time and giving your body some time to heal before they decided to wake you up. That was, again, about a week or two after, where they decided to start getting you off of sedation and off of the ventilator.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I
wow.
think at this point, you probably start to remember some of what was going on once they got you off the sedation.
I mean, basically, when I got off the sedation, it was mom and dad were sitting next to me, and that was the first time I saw the scar on my stomach, and I was like, okay, this actually happened. This was not a dream. Because I feel like my dreams that I had were going along with what was actually happening in the operating rooms. Because Sarah was actually in I remember my first dream that I had, and I just remember trying to find her, and I couldn't find her. And they were saying that the liver didn't take, and they needed to go back in. And the lady in my dream was just coming at me with a knife, and I had the vent tube in, and I couldn't talk to her, and I wanted to tell her how much I had the transplant already, and I don't need, you guys don't need to go back in, but they had to go back in because the liver, the enzymes were off. So, but yeah, it was complicated that first time, and then after I woke up, it was basically the healing process. I actually did have another procedure done with, they found 4 ulcers in my stomach from the feeding tubes. So they had to clamp those ulcers. And basically, once they clamped those, I was headed down the recovery road, finally.
Yeah.
But it was a struggle for sure. I never would have, imagined any of this happening. So I'm just glad that my sister and my whole family was there to help. Um,
After you woke up and you went through all that
yeah.
clamps and everything, and you were finally able to go home. Well, first, did you go home or did you have to go to
No.
rehab?
Well,
Yeah,
I had to basically, I was in the hospital for 41 days.
yeah.
They, I did have to go through PT and stuff. I had to relearn how to, brush my teeth, walk. Sarah was actually with me when I took my first steps. It felt so weird walking again. Yeah, it was. I mean, and I saw a lot of hallucinations. I probably hallucinated for 4 days, 5 days straight after I woke up from sedation. So I definitely saw. I'm assuming what were ancestors. Like I definitely saw my grandma's brother. We called him Uncle Jimmy, and he was sitting next to me in the same kind of like a hospital bed, and he had his gray hat on, and he used to drink vodka, so he was known for drinking vodka. And in his IV going into his arms were vodka bottles. I know,
Oh
very
my
appropriate.
gosh.
Oh my
I know.
goodness.
That's what I saw, though. I was like, and then there was a whole, I don't know. It was for 5 days. It was like I saw like a mountain lion outside of my hospital window. Like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So the pain meds and all of that, that was a lot to not. I mean, it was just a lot because I didn't know what was real and what was not real.
Yeah.
So
Well, they warned me about that before
yeah,
transplant, and I didn't experience anything. No,
yeah.
no hallucinations from me.
Oh,
So,
good. It was actually kind of scary. So you're
yeah.
lucky.
Well, I used to be like bummed out because I
Yeah.
wanted to hallucinate, but then I heard
Yeah.
these stories about people hallucinating about really horrible things. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not going to be jealous anymore. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
happy
No,
I didn't
I
have
swear
those.
I saw someone else like there was someone with like a chainsaw, and then I started seeing noodles on the ceilings, and it was, yeah. I mean, I don't like things taking control of my brain. So it's
Yeah,
like yeah, so it's okay. It's okay that you didn't experience it.
yeah. No, I'm
Yeah.
not
No,
complaining
you're
anymore.
okay. But
So,
um
let's talk about when you were discharged.
Yeah, I think when Megan got discharged from the hospital completely, we stayed in the Porter Hospital like recovery house, I guess they would call it.
like a hospice house.
Yeah, and we stayed there for several weeks. They were so generous, and um, we met some really great people there. And where Megan was working, she had employee housing. After all of this, she was no longer employed it was at Keystone, right, Megan?
Yeah.
And she was no longer employed there. We had to go and get her stuff, and basically move her out, so she was technically homeless. And at the time I was living at a river camp in a fifth wheel, and my intention was to have Megan with me. But, in that environment, if anything happened, if she needed to go to the hospital, it just was not going to be ideal conditions. I basically lived in the woods. And so, we really weren't really sure what we were going to be doing. She had a long recovery path ahead of her.
Yeah.
And, we made the decision that, she needs to stay in Colorado, close to her transplant team. And we ended up going down to my aunt's house, and she lives in Colorado Springs. And that's when we basically decided that she should be staying there and working on her rehabilitation and getting her strength up, because her next big goal was to lose a little bit of weight,
It was
and
40 pounds to be exact.
yeah.
I had to get another surgery a year after for the 3 hernias that I had.
Yeah, to that mesh, it had failed, and so they needed to repair that and then get her abdominal muscles pulled back into place. So it was another big kind of worry, another big surgery, and something that, that took time. Her body really did need to heal. And we just kind of decided that was going to be the best place for her to be. And I think we made the right choice there.
I think so too.
Yeah. And how far away was that from your transplant hospital? Oh, that was in
So
Denver, right? So
yeah, so it was pretty close to where I had my transplant, the
Yeah.
hernia surgery. Yeah.
It was like an hour and a half or something.
yeah. Well, that's
But
good that you had a place to go heal. And how long did you live in Colorado Springs?
I was there, I want to say probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And and then I eventually moved out with my friend Nikki, who lived in Blackhawk.
Okay.
So, and then when I was living with her, that's when COVID decided to show up and kind of ruin everyone's plans. So that's kind of why I migrated back down to New Mexico, was because I couldn't afford to live in Colorado anymore.
Yeah.
So
Well, Colorado's expensive.
it is, yeah.
And we both know New Mexico is a great state. So
It is.
awesome. So other than the hernia surgeries, did you
Yeah.
have any other setbacks or anything from your transplant?
No, I've been dealing with, I've been recently getting sick, and it's been since 2019 that I've been having these episodes of nausea and vomiting. And what I believe, I mean, I have an appointment with GI doctor and stuff, but what we believe is because I don't have a gallbladder anymore, the basically fatty foods, like anything deep fried or, hamburger, greasy, all those fats and toxins aren't getting processed through the gallbladder anymore, and they're just being dumped into my intestines. So I'm thinking that, after these years of eating, greasy stuff, like I feel like that was making me sick. But just I made appointments to make sure that that is what it is. But no setbacks as far as that. I mean, I've been feeling great. My energy levels have been great. Honestly, again, the gratitude I have for life it amazes me because where I was before is not the mindset I had. So this whole experience, it did happen for a reason, and I was meant to be here. Like everything that fell into place. I didn't have insurance at the time when this happened, so they weren't gonna approve me for a transplant when I first got to the hospital. So my mom actually and my aunt got me on Medicaid during that time in the hospital. So
that's great. Yeah. I know a lot of people struggle with that whole insurance thing,
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, if I would have waited any longer, I definitely wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
So definitely waited till last minute.
Yeah.
So
well, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you're doing so well. And I love hearing these stories of people who are, almost at the end, and then they get this miracle and they get to keep living their best life. And I think it's fantastic. And I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a second chance at making, a better life for myself.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it too.
Yeah. So let me ask you one last question. And if you have something else you want to add, you can too. But my question is, if you had a piece of advice for somebody who's pre-transplant that you wish that you had known before you were transplant, what would that be?
I'd say look at the positive side of things. I mean, as hard as it may seem, just know that God is on your side. And I think that with having a positive mindset can really make things a lot better in a really, unfortunate situation. And so it's just being positive and stay strong. I mean, the whole time I was in the hospital, I feel like I tried to keep it positive, and I think that it made it a lot easier on a lot of people, because learning to control the things that we can and kind of just accepting what we can't. Acceptance is freeing. And I've been saying that, since this happened, because I've had to accept everything that has happened, good and bad. So just keep your heads up. There's always, a reason for everything. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I think I think you have an incredible story. And
thank you.
Sarah, thank you for coming on too and helping Megan with her blackout parts that she didn't remember.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, you guys have a great day, and I'll be talking with you soon. Thank you for listening to the Pre to Post Transplant podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook. Oh, and if you have not signed up to be an organ donor, please visit www.organdonor.gov and register today. You too can save lives.